Welcome, lost traveler, to another tale from beyond the Event Horizon presents podcast. You can die anywhere, but you chose to do it here with us. We here on the other side appreciate your sacrifice. As you know, there is no escape once you are beyond the Event Horizon. Kyle slowly made his way through the cold, wet forest. The shock of his current situation and the excess moisture in the early morning air punctuated his discomfort. He was amazed at how such mundane things could still upset him, no matter how much his world was collapsing. Life was funny like that, he thought. His feet felt as though they were firmly planted, refusing to move any farther. His knees threatened to buckle, and his legs shook from all the running he'd done throughout the night. Blood cascaded from his right hand, dripping onto the forest floor and forming a small puddle. Kyle knew he needed to stop the relentless hemorrhaging. Tearing a strip from his sweater, he wrapped it tightly around his hand to cover the gash. He hunched over, gasping for air. With each strained breath, he could taste the damp forest and the soggy earth that surrounded him in every direction. Kyle had no idea where he was, but he knew he had no choice but to keep moving. Safety wasn't an assured if he stayed stationary, a lesson gruesomely learned by the other counselors. The horrors he had witnessed tonight were seared into his psyche, destined to haunt him for however long he managed to survive in this God-forsaken world. He understood that the constant adrenaline and movement kept the blood flowing from his wound, making it harder to stop. He could feel the relentless pulse of his grief-stricken heart in every beat. But there was no choice. He had to push forward through the pain. Only then did he realize he'd been mindlessly humming his family's favorite song under his breath. Tears welled in his burning, exhausted eyes. At that moment, he longed desperately to be with his family. Kyle remembered how, during every family vacation, their song would blare from any audio device multiple times in a row. His mother and sister always made a point of grabbing him and his father, insisting they join in with the exaggerated arm signals that went along with the song. The four of them would cheerfully launch their arms into a Y shape in unison, followed by an over-the-top M pose. His mother and sister would eagerly wait for the final two letters, practically buzzing with energy. Kyle and his father, however, would always try to sneak away, only to be apprehended by the self-declared party police. How he ached for those moments. With his sister Patty off at college, their parents had been incessantly texting and calling him. Empty nest syndrome must really be hitting them hard, he thought. This summer was supposed to be epic, not tragic. His heart throbbed for Erin, the girl he had met at the creek. A flirty brunette with an easy laugh, she had completely captured his attention just 2 days ago. He'd gone to the creek with Tom and Louise to meet girls, and it had worked better than he'd expected. Kyle was certain that what he and Erin had could have become more than just a summer fling. How long had this horror, this killer, been stalking him? The absolute darkness of the area where Kyle now stood would have been perfect for stargazing under different circumstances. But now that same impenetrable blackness left him vulnerable to an ambush. Suddenly, a blinding light pierced through the darkness, flooding the area ahead of him. The brightness was so abrupt that Kyle reflexively shielded his eyes. As his vision adjusted, he knew exactly where he needed to go. The campsite slasher was sending him an unmistakable invitation. Kyle would oblige. Staggering closer to the light source, it became evident that it was emanating from an outdoor facility or stadium. The stillness around him felt unnatural. No scurrying woodland creatures, no distant hoots or howls. It was as if the carnage he had witnessed earlier had driven every living thing away. Kyle's breath came in ragged gasps, his slashed hand throbbing, a grim memento from the moment he'd tried and failed to save Erin. When he reached the front gate of the small outdoor stadium, his heart nearly stopped. In the distance, he spotted the park ranger. Relief surged through him, and he broke into a limping, desperate run. But as he got closer, something was off. The park ranger stood unnaturally still, covering his face with his hands. Kyle's concern deepened. Why would he do that? Another step forward revealed the horrifying answer. Kyle's stomach churned violently, and he bent over, vomiting onto the ground. The park ranger's head had no body. It dangled from a severed spinal column, which swayed grotesquely with the rhythm of blood dripping from its base. The ranger's eye sockets were stuffed with severed hands, pinned in place with tent stakes. Kyle's gaze darted to the left, where another gruesome scene awaited. Tom. His friend's cleaved and bruised head lay on the ground, a grotesque parody of its former self. Bloodied and bloated hands had been stabbed into his mouth with paring knives, silencing him forever. The mutilated hands were bloody, bony, and bloated. Stunned, Kyle slowly backed up and hit the fence behind him. He instantly realized that he was leaning on a disembodied head of another person. Kyle jumped forward and spun around. To his shock, Kyle saw Luis's devious eyes staring out into the void of the afterlife. Even in that fallen state, Luis lost none of his devious charm. Even in death, he looked like he was up to something. Two severed hands hung from his ears, pinned in place by hunting arrows. Kyle stumbled away quickly. He felt cold as ice and absolutely empty. Mentally, emotionally, physically. He was now in the main arena area. A spotlight shined in his eyes. He slowly moved forward, using his left hand to shield the overpowering brightness. He saw Erin's best friend, fastened and tied against the fence of the area. A chain had been wrapped around her neck until it snapped like a twig. Her head was leaning unnaturally left, her green eyes bulging, forever staring forward. Her hands were tied up, the left one slightly to the left, and the right one slightly to the right. He had seen that position before. No, 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 no! Kyle collapsed to his knees, hyperventilating. Hot tears ran down his face and washed away a line of dirt on each of his cheeks. The corpse of his summer fling was contorted into an unmistakable M shape. Different-sized knives penetrated every inch of her exposed skin. Kyle screamed, "Get out here, you coward!" "I'm going to do the same thing to you," he said, shuddering from the quick inhale and exhale of air that was punishing his already weary lungs. The killer stepped out of the shadows and pulled her hoodie down. The campsite killer was singing loudly. "It's fun to stay at the YMC," the killer belted out in a warm and comforting tone. "I love you," she said as she ran at him with the bloodied machete. He swore he could see chunks and pieces of organic matter scattered among the velvet blood coat. She was always a show woman, he thought. The killer struck the machete on the floor and ran towards him, causing sparks to fly in a trail behind her. The sparks brightened the already glowing court. She grinned as she brought the machete around in a circle and down in an arc towards Kyle's head. Her son Kyle stood in shock, mouth agape and a little hint of a smile at the edge of the right corner of his face. Love is strange that way, he thought. Thank you, Lost Traveler, for joining us on another unintended journey beyond the event horizon. We hope you join us next time for a new macabre tale. Until then, stay alive and breathe if you can. We Lost Souls at Beyond the Event Horizon Presents podcast depend on travelers such as yourself to maintain our aging and deteriorating signal equipment. Please consider purchasing one of our low-cost and even 99-cent e-stories only located on Amazon.com. Search beyond the Event Horizon presents and take a look at the horror that you find. Until next time, try to breathe and survive. Once you are past the Event Horizon, there is no return.